The eviction notice was pink. Claire Morrison had always thought that was cruel, choosing such a cheerful color for something that meant losing your home. She stood in the doorway of her apartment, mail clutched in one hand, grocery bag sliding down her other arm, staring at the paper taped to her door. 30 days. That's all she had left. Her 7-year-old daughter Lily appeared at the top of the stairs, backpack bouncing against her small frame. "Mom, Mrs. Chen says she has cookies for me. Can I go to her apartment?" Claire forced a smile, quickly pulling the notice down and crumpling it into her pocket. "Sure, baby. Just for 20 minutes, okay? Then homework." As Lily scampered down the hall, Claire finally let herself breathe. She leaned against the door frame, eyes burning with tears she refused to let fall. 2 months behind on rent. 3, if you counted the partial payment Mr. Kowalski had grudgingly accepted last week. Her second job at the diner had cut her hours. Again, and the car was making a sound that meant expensive things she couldn't afford to fix. 34 years old, and this is where life had brought her. A studio apartment in a building where the heat barely worked. Raising a daughter alone after Derek had decided fatherhood was too much pressure and disappeared to California with his new girlfriend. No child support, no forwarding address. Just gone. Claire pushed through the door and set the groceries on the counter. Ramen noodles, peanut butter, the cheapest bread she could find, and apples because Lily needed something healthy. $43 for a week of food. She'd gotten good at making nothing stretch into something. The mail was the usual collection of bills and advertisements. Electric company threatening disconnection. Medical bills from Lily's emergency room visit last year when she'd broken her arm. Credit card statements for cards that were already maxed out, used for things like winter coats and school supplies that other parents bought without thinking twice. But there was one envelope that stood out. Heavy, cream-colored paper. Expensive. The return address read, Whitmore, Sterling and Associates, Estate Attorneys, Monterey, California. Claire opened it carefully, half expecting another scam. She'd fallen for one of those you've inherited money schemes 2 years ago, lost $300 she couldn't afford to lose, and learned her lesson. "Dear Ms. Morrison," it read, "we are writing to inform you of the estate settlement of Mr. Theodore Hartwell, deceased, who passed away on March 3rd of this year." Theodore Hartwell. The name stirred something distant in Claire's memory. Her mother's uncle? Her grandmother's brother? Someone on that side of the family she'd never met. Someone who'd never reached out during all the years she was growing up poor, struggling, alone. As sole surviving heir to Mr. Hartwell's estate, you have been named beneficiary of his primary property and all contents therein. Claire sat down slowly. Heir, beneficiary. These were words from another world. A world where people had things to leave behind. The property in question is the Hartwell Butterfly Sanctuary, located at 847 Meadowbrook Road, Monterey County, California. The facility has been closed since Mr. Hartwell's declining health forced him to cease operations in 2019. The structure consists of approximately 18,000 square feet of glass conservatory buildings, support facilities, and 6.5 acres of land. A butterfly sanctuary. Claire had never heard Theodore mention anything about butterflies. Then again, she'd never heard him mention anything because they'd never spoken. She knew nothing about this man except that he existed somewhere on her family tree, distant and disconnected. Please be advised that the property carries significant obligations. Annual property taxes are approximately $34,000. Maintenance, utilities, and insurance at an estimated $45,000 per year. The sanctuary has been closed for 5 years and requires substantial repairs to be operational. Claire's heart sank. Of course, this wasn't a gift. It was a burden, a money pit she couldn't afford, dropped onto her shoulders by a man she'd never known. Given the property's condition and financial obligations, we have arranged for you to acquire ownership for the symbolic sum of $1, which you may remit to our office at your convenience. This will transfer all rights, responsibilities, and liabilities to you. Alternatively, you may disclaim the inheritance within 30 days, at which point the property will be sold at auction by the county to satisfy tax debts. $1. He was giving her a butterfly sanctuary for $1 because no one else wanted it. Claire read the letter 3 times, then pulled out her phone and searched for images of the Hartwell Butterfly Sanctuary. What she found took her breath away. Photographs from better days showed enormous glass structures rising like crystal cathedrals from landscape gardens. Inside, thousands of butterflies filled spaces designed to look like rainforests, meadows, and tropical gardens. Reviews on old tourism sites called it magical, breathtaking, an experience unlike any other. But the more recent photos told a different story. Broken glass, overgrown paths, a faded sign hanging at an angle. One reviewer from 2020 wrote, "So sad to see this place abandoned. We brought our kids here 10 years ago and it was incredible. Now it's just rotting away. Someone should save it. Someone should save it." Claire stared at those words, something stirring in her chest. A butterfly sanctuary. Glass buildings full of light and color and living things. 6.5 acres of land. It was insane. She had 30 days before eviction. She had no money. She had no idea how to run a butterfly sanctuary or fix broken glass or do any of the 100 things the property obviously needed. But what was the alternative? Stay here and wait for Mr. Kowalski to change the locks? Keep working double shifts at jobs that barely paid rent? Watch Lily grow up in this apartment where the walls were so thin you could hear every fight, every siren, every reminder of how little they had? Claire pulled out the crumpled eviction notice and smoothed it on the table next to the inheritance letter. 30 days in both. It felt like a sign, though she wasn't sure if it was a good one or a warning. That night, after Lily was asleep in the Murphy bed that folded down from the wall, Claire lay on the couch that doubled as her own bed and stared at the ceiling. She thought about butterflies, about how they transformed from crawling caterpillars into creatures that could fly, about metamorphosis and change and the courage it took to break out of a cocoon. In the morning, she called the attorney's office. "I'll take it," she said. "The sanctuary. I'll take it." The lawyer, a man named Robert Sterling, sounded surprised. "Ms. Morrison, I want to make sure you understand what you're accepting. This property requires significant investment. The buildings need repairs. The systems are outdated. You be responsible for her." "I understand," Claire interrupted. "I've read everything. I'll take it." There was a pause. Then Sterling said, "Very well. I'll draw up the paperwork. You need to take possession within 45 days. There are some items left on the property that Mr. Hartwell wanted you to have specifically. Personal effects. Documents. He left instructions that you should go through everything carefully before making any decisions about the property's future." "What kind of instructions?" "He didn't specify, just that you should look carefully at everything, particularly in the chrysalis chamber." "The chrysalis chamber?" "It's one of the exhibit spaces." I'm not entirely sure what he meant. Mr. Hartwell became somewhat eccentric in his final years, but he was very clear about this. He said, and I quote, "Tell Claire to look in the chrysalis chamber. Tell her that metamorphosis requires patience. Tell her that what seems dead is often just transforming." Claire felt chills run down her arms. "He knew my name?" "Apparently he'd been following your life from a distance. Never reached out, which I understand must feel strange, but he seemed to care about you in his own way. He specifically chose you as his heir, Ms. Morrison. He could have left the property to conservation groups or sold it to cover debts. Instead, he left it to you. I don't know why, but I suspect you'll find answers at the sanctuary." 2 weeks later, Claire and Lily stood in front of a U-Haul truck containing everything they owned. It hadn't taken long to pack. Their entire life fit in a 10-foot truck with room to spare. Lily clutched a stuffed butterfly she'd insisted they buy at a thrift store when Claire told her where they were moving. "Do you think there will be real butterflies there, Mom? Like thousands of them flying around?" "I don't know, baby." Claire lifted Lily into the passenger seat. "The place has been closed for a long time, but maybe we can bring them back." The drive from their apartment in Sacramento to Monterey County took 6 hours. They stopped twice for bathroom breaks and cheap fast food. Lily chattered endlessly about butterflies, having checked out every book the library had on the subject. She recited facts about monarch migrations and swallowtail life cycles, and how some butterflies lived only a few days while others lived for months. The painted lady can fly 2,000 miles, Mom. 2,000. That's further than we're driving. Claire smiled, grateful for her daughter's joy. In Lily's world, this was an adventure. In Claire's world, it was a desperate gamble that would either save them or destroy them. They reached Monterey County just as the sun was setting. The GPS led them off the highway onto progressively smaller roads until they were on a Tulane County route winding through rolling hills covered in oak trees and wild grasses. 847 Meadowbrook Road, the GPS announced. You have arrived at your destination. Claire pulled off the road onto what had once been a paved driveway, but was now more pothole than pavement. The U-Haul bumped and rattled as they climbed a gentle slope. And then she saw it. The Hartwell Butterfly Sanctuary rose before them like something from a dream or a nightmare. Claire couldn't decide which. The main conservatory was enormous, maybe 100 feet long and 40 feet high at its peak. Glass panels formed a geodesic dome that caught the last rays of sunset, turning golden orange. But many of those panels were cracked or missing entirely. Vines and weeds had grown up through breaks in the foundation, climbing the metal framework like they were trying to reclaim the building for the forest. Behind the main dome, Claire could see other structures. Smaller conservatory buildings, what looked like an office or visitor center, storage sheds, and greenhouses, all in various states of decay. Wow, Lily whispered. It's like a castle. A glass castle. Claire's hands gripped the steering wheel. What had she done? This wasn't a property. This was a ruin. A money pit that would swallow whatever savings she had left and then demand more. But they were here now, and they had nowhere else to go. She parked near what appeared to be the main entrance, and they climbed out. The air smelled like earth and growing things. Birds sang in the oak trees surrounding the property. The sun had almost set, painting the sky in shades of purple and pink. Claire found the keys in the packet the attorney had sent. There were dozens of them, labeled in careful handwriting. Main entrance, office, storage building, chrysalis chamber, tropical wing, temperate wing, greenhouse 1, greenhouse 2. The main entrance door was heavy wood, swollen from moisture and neglect. It took Claire several tries to get the key to turn. When she finally pushed it open, the hinges screamed like something dying. Inside was darkness and the smell of old, still air. Claire fumbled for a light switch. After a moment, fluorescent lights flickered to life, some dying immediately with little pops of blown bulbs. But enough remained to illuminate the space. They were standing in what had been a visitor center. Display cases lined the walls, now empty except for dead leaves and dust. Faded posters showed butterfly life cycles and migration patterns. A ticket counter sat abandoned, the cash register drawer hanging open. Behind it, a door led deeper into the facility. Mom, look! Lily pointed to the wall where a large painted mural showed hundreds of butterflies in flight. Despite years of neglect, the colors remained vibrant. Blue morphos, monarch butterflies, swallowtails, painted ladies, all frozen in their upward journey across the wall. Claire felt something catch in her throat. Someone had painted this with love, with attention to detail that spoke of passion and purpose. Theodore Hartwell had built this place, had created something beautiful, and then had to watch it die when his health failed. They explored slowly, Lily staying close to Claire's side. The main conservatory was even more heartbreaking from the inside. The floor was original tile, cracked but still beautiful, forming a pathway through what had been gardens. Dead plants filled the beds. A waterfall feature sat dry and filled with leaves. And everywhere, the glass walls soared overhead, broken in places, covered in grime in others, but still magnificent. This would have been amazing, Claire said softly, when it was alive. She imagined it full of butterflies, full of visitors, full of life and color and wonder. The waste of it all made her chest ache. They found the office next. Theodore Hartwell's office. Unlike the conservatory, this room had been sealed up well. The air was stale, but not ruined. A large wooden desk sat covered in papers. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with volumes on entomology, botany, ecology, and surprisingly, art and antiquities. Claire pulled out one book at random. Inside the cover, a book plate read, "From the library of Theodore Hartwell, collector." Collector. That was an interesting word choice. Lily found a photo album on the desk and flipped through it. "Mom, look at this man. Is this Theodore?" Claire looked at the photographs. A tall man, maybe in his 70s, with a neat white beard and gentle eyes. He stood among the butterflies in what must have been the sanctuary in its prime. In one photo, he held a blue morpho butterfly on his finger, his expression one of pure joy. "That's him," Claire confirmed. "Your great-great-uncle. He looks nice. Why didn't we know him?" "I don't know, baby. Sometimes families lose touch. It's sad." They explored further, finding a small apartment attached to the office. Theodore had lived here, Claire realized. Not just worked here, but lived here among his butterflies. The apartment was simple. A bedroom, a bathroom, a tiny kitchen. But it was clean and intact. "Can we stay here tonight?" Lily asked. Instead of in the truck, Claire tested the bed. The mattress was old, but acceptable. The bathroom, when she turned on the faucet, produced rust-colored water that gradually cleared. The electricity worked. "Okay," she agreed. "We'll stay here tonight. Tomorrow we'll start figuring out what to do with this place." But after Lily fell asleep in Theodore's bed, hugging her stuffed butterfly, Claire continued exploring. Something about the attorney's message nagged at her. The chrysalis chamber. Look carefully. Metamorphosis requires patience. She found the chrysalis chamber key and followed signs through the darkened conservatory. The chrysalis chamber turned out to be a smaller dome attached to the main structure. When Claire unlocked it and turned on the lights, she gasped. The walls were lined with display cases, hundreds of them, each containing preserved chrysalises in various stages. Monarch chrysalises in jade green with gold spots. Swallowtail chrysalises in brown and green camouflage. Luna moth cocoons wrapped in leaves. Each one carefully mounted, labeled, and lit. But it was the center of the room that drew Claire's attention. A large glass case, maybe 8 feet tall and 4 feet wide, stood alone. Inside, suspended from delicate wires, were dozens of chrysalises. But these weren't simple paper cocoons. They were enormous, some as large as her fist, and they seemed to be made of something that caught the light strangely. Claire approached slowly. The light played across the surfaces of the chrysalises in ways that didn't make sense. They shimmered, almost like metal. Like gold. No, not like gold. They were gold. Claire's mouth went dry. She circled the case, examining it from all angles. The chrysalises were sculptures, she realized. Art pieces, but not just any art. These were detailed, intricate works made from what appeared to be solid gold, embedded with precious stones that represented the natural patterns of real chrysalises. She found a small placard at the base of the case. The Metamorphosis Collection. Private Commission, Theodore Hartwell, 1987 to 2019. Not for public display. Not for public display. These pieces had never been part of the public sanctuary. They'd been Theodore's private collection. Claire pulled out her phone and took a photo, then searched for information on chrysalis art, on butterfly sculptures, on anything that might explain what she was looking at. What she found made her knees weak. There was an entire world of high-end butterfly art. Collectors who paid millions for pieces by famous artists. Auctions where chrysalis sculptures sold for hundreds of thousands of dollars. And Theodore Hartwell's name appeared in several articles from the 1980s and 90s. He'd been a serious collector before opening the sanctuary. Had amassed a collection worth. Claire couldn't even process the numbers she was seeing. She circled the display case again, her heart pounding. There were at least 30 sculptures in this case alone. If each one was worth what the articles suggested. No, this was insane. These couldn't be real gold and gems. They had to be replicas. Good replicas, maybe, but not the genuine articles. Theodore had been struggling financially at the end. If he'd had access to this kind of wealth, he would have used it to save the sanctuary. Unless he'd hidden it. Unless he'd preserved it for whoever came after him. Unless this was what he meant when he said to look carefully in the chrysalis chamber. Claire found a small hammer in Theodore's desk and returned to the chrysalis chamber. Her hand shook as she examined the glass case. There had to be a way to open it, to examine the pieces, to determine if they were real or just beautiful fakes. At the base of the case, she found a small lock. She tried keys from Theodore's ring until one clicked. The front panel of the case swung open on well-oiled hinges. Claire reached out and touched the nearest chrysalis sculpture. It was cold, heavy. She lifted it carefully from its wire. It was real gold. The weight, the feel, the way the light played across it. This was real. She turned it over and found a tiny inscription on the bottom. Monarch number 7, 24K gold, emerald accents. Artist, Santiago Moreno. Commission, 1991. Santiago Moreno. Claire searched the name on her phone. One of the most famous butterfly and insect artists of the late 20th century. His pieces sold for anywhere from $200,000 to over $1 million, depending on size and complexity. And this case held 30 of them. Claire set the sculpture down carefully and backed away from the case. This was impossible. Theodore Hartwell had been a butterfly enthusiast who'd run a small sanctuary. He died struggling to pay property taxes. He couldn't have had access to millions in art. Except apparently he did. Claire's mind raced. The attorney had said to look carefully. He'd said Theodore had personal effects and documents for her to examine. There had to be more information somewhere. An explanation. A catalog. Proof of ownership and value. She returned to the office and began searching through the desk drawers systematically. Most contained ordinary things. Bills, correspondence, maintenance logs. But in the bottom drawer, locked with a key she had to search 20 minutes to find, Claire discovered a leather portfolio. Inside were documents. Lots of documents. Purchase receipts for art pieces dating back to 1985. Appraisals from 2018, just before Theodore closed the sanctuary. Insurance policies. A detailed inventory. Claire's hands shook as she read through the appraisal. The chrysalis sculptures in the main case, $47 million. But they weren't the only pieces. The portfolio referenced other collections throughout the property. Hidden collections. There was a map. Hand-drawn, with Theodore's careful notations. Tropical wing, east wall, behind the bromeliad display. Temperate wing, water feature base. Greenhouse 2, beneath the potting bench. Chrysalis chamber, storage room. Storage room. Claire hadn't seen a storage room. She grabbed a flashlight and Theodore's keys and returned to the chrysalis chamber. At the back of the space, hidden behind a tall display case, she found a door she'd missed earlier. It was labeled mechanical, do not enter. The key turned smoothly. Claire pushed the door open and shined her light inside. It wasn't a mechanical room. It was a vault. The space was maybe 10 feet by 12 feet, climate-controlled, with walls lined in what looked like fireproof material. And on custom shelving that ran floor to ceiling were more display cases. Smaller ones this time, each containing a single piece. Claire approached the nearest shelf and read the labels. Painted Lady number 3. Artist, Yuki Tanaka. Platinum and sapphire. Value, $3.2 million. Swallowtail number 12. Artist, Maria Russo. White gold and black diamond. Value, $5.7 million. Atlas moth number 4. Artist, Santiago Moreno. Gold and ruby. Value, $8.1 million. The numbers climbed higher as Claire moved through the vault. Some pieces were small, delicate things the size of her thumb. Others were massive sculptures that must have weighed 30 pounds. All were exquisite. All were valuable beyond anything Claire had ever imagined. At the back of the vault, she found one final case, larger than the others, and inside, a note in Theodore's handwriting. For Claire, the culmination of my life's work and passion. The Metamorphosis Suite. 30 pieces representing the complete life cycle of the monarch butterfly, from egg to caterpillar to chrysalis to adult. Commissioned over 30 years from the world's finest artists. Appraised value as of 2018, $482 million. This is yours now. Use it wisely. Use it well. Use it to create something beautiful. Claire read the note 3 times. Then she sat down hard on the floor of the vault because her legs wouldn't hold her anymore. $482 million. She'd inherited $482 million in butterfly art. The man she'd never known. The great uncle who'd never reached out, who'd let her struggle and scrape and work herself to exhaustion for minimum wage and tips, had been sitting on a $500 million fortune, and he'd left it all to her. Claire stayed in the vault until dawn, surrounded by treasures she couldn't fully comprehend. Outside, birds began to sing. Light crept through the broken glass panels of the sanctuary. And somewhere in Theodore's apartment, her daughter slept peacefully, dreaming of butterflies that could fly 2,000 miles. Claire pulled out her phone. No signal this far out. She'd have to drive into town to call the attorney, to call someone, to figure out what to do with this impossible inheritance. But first, she needed to see the rest of it. If the map was accurate, there were more collections hidden throughout the property. More pieces, more value, more secrets waiting to be discovered in the ruins of a butterfly sanctuary that a strange man had built and filled with treasures he'd spent his life collecting. Claire stood up, steadied herself, and walked back through the chrysalis chamber to the main conservatory. Early morning light was streaming through the broken glass, creating patterns on the floor. Dust motes danced in the beams. And for just a moment, Claire could imagine what this place had been. What could be again? The butterflies were gone. The visitors were gone. The life and color and wonder, all gone. But the foundation remained. The structure stood, and hidden within its walls, a fortune that could rebuild not just the sanctuary, but Claire's entire life. She thought about Theodore's note. Use it wisely. Use it well. Use it to create something beautiful. Claire looked around at the decay, at the broken glass and dead plants and abandoned dreams. Then she looked at her hands, calloused from waitressing and cleaning and doing whatever it took to survive. She'd come here with nothing but a 7-year-old daughter, a U-Haul full of second-hand furniture, and nowhere else to go. Now she stood in the middle of a ruin that held more wealth than she could spend in 10 lifetimes. And she had absolutely no idea what to do next. Outside, a bird landed on one of the broken glass panels. It was a butterfly. No, Claire corrected herself, getting closer. A painted lady, with its orange and black wings spread wide, perched on the edge of Theodore's broken dream. As Claire watched, another butterfly joined it. Then another. Within minutes, a dozen butterflies clustered on the broken glass, as if they'd been waiting for someone to return. As if they knew the sanctuary might live again. Claire pulled out her phone and took a photo. Then she walked back to Theodore's apartment to wake her daughter. They had work to do, questions to answer, decisions to make that would change everything. But first, breakfast. Then maybe they'd explore more of the property. See what other secrets Theodore had left behind. Figure out how a man who could barely pay his property taxes had managed to hide $500 million in art inside a butterfly sanctuary. And somewhere in all of this, Claire would have to decide what kind of person she wanted to be. The kind who sold it all and disappeared into wealth? Or the kind who stayed and tried to build something beautiful from the ruins? Theodore had spent his life collecting beauty, creating it, preserving it. And at the end, he'd given it all to her, a great niece he'd never met, a woman struggling to survive, a single mother who needed a miracle. He'd given her the miracle. Now, it was up to Claire to figure out what to do with it. The sun rose higher, burning through the morning mist that gathered in the valleys. Light filled the sanctuary, illuminating dust and decay and possibility in equal measure. Claire stood in the doorway between Theodore's apartment and the conservatory, coffee in hand, watching the light transform the broken space into something that looked almost magical. Behind her, Lily was still sleeping. Ahead of her, a day full of impossible decisions. And all around her, in hidden vaults and secret spaces, a fortune in butterfly art waited to be discovered, appraised, and eventually sold? Displayed? Protected? Claire didn't know yet, but she was beginning to understand why Theodore had chosen her. Not because she knew about art or butterflies or how to run a sanctuary, but because she knew what it meant to struggle, to survive, to protect something precious even when the world tried to take it away. She'd spent 7 years protecting her daughter, working impossible hours, sacrificing everything to keep them afloat. Now Theodore was asking her to protect something else. His life's work, his passion, his beautiful, impossible dream of a place where butterflies lived and people came to witness transformation. The painted ladies were still gathered on the broken glass, their wings opening and closing slowly in the warming air. More had joined them. Claire counted at least 20 now, maybe more. They come back. Despite the decay, despite the years of abandonment, the butterflies had come back. Maybe that was the real message. Maybe that was what Theodore had been trying to tell her about metamorphosis and patience and transformation. Some things couldn't be rushed. Some changes took time. And sometimes what looked dead was just transforming, waiting for the right moment to emerge and fly. Claire finished her coffee and set down the cup. Time to wake Lily. Time to start making calls. Time to figure out what came next. But first, she was going to explore every inch of this property. Find every hidden treasure. Document every piece. Understand exactly what Theodore had left her. And then she was going to decide what kind of life she wanted to build from the ruins of his. Claire spent the next 3 days documenting everything. She photographed each piece in the chrysalis chamber vault, carefully noting Theodore's catalog numbers and cross-referencing them with the appraisal documents. Lily helped, writing down descriptions in her careful second-grade handwriting, treating it like the most important homework assignment in the world. The map led them to 5 more hidden collections throughout the property. Behind the bromeliad display in the tropical wing, they found a climate-controlled cabinet containing 12 pieces valued at over $60 million. Beneath the water feature in the temperate wing, a sealed compartment held another 20 pieces. Each discovery made Claire's head spin more. By the 4th day, they'd cataloged collections totaling just over $482 million, exactly as Theodore's note had indicated. But what struck Claire most wasn't the value. It was the obsessive care Theodore had taken to preserve everything. Each piece was perfectly stored, climate-controlled, protected from light and moisture. The man had let his sanctuary crumble while spending his last dollars to protect the art. "Mom, why did he hide everything?" Lily asked as they sat among the sculptures in the main vault, eating sandwiches for lunch. "If they're so pretty, why didn't he show people?" "I think," Claire said slowly, "he was afraid someone would take them. Or maybe he was waiting for the right person to give them to." "He gave them to you because you needed them," Lily announced with the certainty of a 7-year-old who'd figured out the universe. "You needed them, so he saved them for you." Claire hugged her daughter close. Maybe that was exactly right. That afternoon, Claire finally got enough cell signal to call the attorney. Robert Sterling answered on the second ring. "Ms. Morrison, I've been hoping to hear from you. Have you taken possession of the property?" "I have." "Mr. Sterling, I need to ask you something. Did Theodore ever mention what was in the chrysalis chamber? What I might find here?" There was a pause. "He mentioned that you should examine the property carefully, that there were collections of value." "Why? Have you found something?" Claire looked around the vault, at the millions of dollars in art surrounding her. "Mr. Sterling, I found approximately $482 million in butterfly and insect art hidden throughout the sanctuary. Museum-quality pieces by famous artists. All documented, all authentic as far as I can tell." The silence on the other end stretched, so long Claire thought the call had dropped. "Mr. Sterling? I'm here." His voice sounded strangled. "Did you say $482 million? According to Theodore's appraisals from 2018, yes. Possibly more now if values have increased." "My God." Sterling was quiet again. "He never told me. We handled his will, managed the property transfer, and he never once mentioned." He stopped. "Ms. Morrison, you need to secure that property immediately. Professional security. And you need authentication. I can recommend experts who. That's why I'm calling. I need help. I don't know what to do with any of this. Don't do anything yet. Don't tell anyone else what you found. I'm going to make some calls. There are people we need to involve. Art appraisers, insurance specialists, possibly the police if there's any question about." He paused. "Was Theodore the legal owner of all these pieces?" "Everything's documented. Purchase receipts, certificates of authenticity, the full provenance for each piece. He bought them all legally between 1985 and 2015. Then you're the legal owner now. But Ms. Morrison, with this kind of value, you need to understand something. People will come. Art dealers, collectors, auction houses, possibly Theodore's former associates or business partners. anyone who knew about this collection, and not all of them will have good intentions. Claire felt ice settle in her stomach. What do you mean? I mean that $500 million in portable art attracts a certain kind of attention, the kind that doesn't always respect property rights or personal safety. You're alone out there with a 7-year-old child. You need protection. After the call ended, Claire stood in the vault feeling the walls close in. She'd been so focused on the discovery, on the impossible windfall, that she hadn't considered the danger. But Sterling was right. She was alone in an isolated property with treasures that people would kill for. That night, Claire barely slept. Every sound made her jump. Branches against glass, animals in the underbrush, the settling of old buildings. She kept Lily close, both of them sharing Theodore's bed, and she positioned the hammer from the desk on the nightstand within reach. In the morning, she woke to find Lily already up, standing at the window and looking out at the conservatory. "Mom, there are people here." Claire bolted upright. Through the window, she could see 2 vehicles parked near the main entrance. A silver BMW and a black SUV. As she watched, 3 people emerged. 2 men in expensive suits and a woman in designer clothes that probably cost more than Claire used to make in a month. "Stay here," Claire ordered, grabbing her phone. "Lock the door after me. Don't open it for anyone except me." She rushed out to meet them before they could enter the sanctuary. The morning was cool, mist still clinging to the valley below. The 3 visitors turned as she approached, their expressions shifting from curiosity to assessment. "Can I help you?" Claire kept her voice level, authoritative. "This is private property." The woman stepped forward, her smile professionally warm. "Ms. Morrison? Claire Morrison? I'm Vanessa Chen, representing the Holloway Collection in San Francisco. These are my associates, Marcus Reed and David Pemberton." The names meant nothing to Claire. "How did you know I was here?" "Word travels in the art world, Ms. Morrison, especially when someone inherits a property from Theodore Hartwell. His collection was legendary, though very private. We're here to make you an offer." "An offer for what?" "For the butterfly art, of course." Vanessa's smile widened. "We understand Theodore accumulated quite a remarkable collection over the years. The Holloway Collection specializes in natural history art. We're prepared to offer you $50 million for the lot, sight unseen. Full market value, cash payment, and we'll handle all the logistics of removal and insurance." Claire felt her blood pressure spike. $50 million? The collection is worth 10 times that. Marcus Reed, the older of the 2 men, chuckled condescendingly. "Ms. Morrison, with respect, you're not qualified to appraise fine art. Theodore's collection, while interesting, consisted primarily of commercial pieces, decorative works, not investment-grade art. Is that why you're here?" Claire shot back. "Because of commercial, decorative pieces worth $50 million. David Pemberton, younger and slicker than Reed, pulled out a tablet. "Ms. Morrison, let's be realistic. You're a single mother. You inherited a property you can't afford to maintain with art you can't afford to insure. Property taxes alone will bankrupt you within a year. We're offering you a way out. Life-changing money in exchange for pieces you can't possibly keep." "How do you know I'm a single mother?" Claire's voice went cold. "How do you know anything about me?" Vanessa's smile never wavered. "Background checks are standard practice in acquisitions of this magnitude. We wanted to ensure you were the legitimate heir before approaching you with an offer." "You mean you wanted to know if I was desperate enough to accept a lowball offer?" $50 million is hardly lowball," Reed interjected. "It's more money than you'd see in 10 lifetimes of waitressing." The contempt in his voice made Claire's hands ball into fists. These people had investigated her, had learned about her old job, her struggles, her circumstances, and now they were using that knowledge to pressure her into selling. "Get off my property," Claire said quietly. "Now." "Ms. Morrison, be reasonable," Vanessa started. "Now, before I call the sheriff." The 3 exchanged glances. Then Pemberton shrugged. "Your loss. But you should know you're going to get more offers. Not all of them will be as generous as ours. And not all of them will be as polite." They returned to their vehicles, but as they drove away, Claire noticed Reed on his phone, already making calls. When Sterling arrived 3 hours later with a security team and the art appraiser he'd promised, Claire was still shaking. They already knew, she told the attorney as they walked toward the sanctuary. They knew about the collection. How is that possible? Sterling's face was grim. Theodore's collection wasn't as secret as he thought. People in the art world knew he was a serious collector in the 80s and 90s. When he stopped appearing at auctions and sales, there was speculation about what he'd done with his pieces. Some thought he'd sold them. Others suspected he'd kept them. The appraiser, a woman named Dr. Elena Vasquez from the Getty Museum, listened intently. Mr. Hartwell was famous for his butterfly obsession. Dealers called him the Monarch because he'd pay any price for pieces he wanted. But he disappeared from the market around 2000. People assumed he'd run out of money or lost interest. He was building the sanctuary, Claire said. He put everything into creating this place. They reached the chrysalis chamber, and Claire unlocked the vault. Dr. Vasquez stepped inside and froze. "Dear God," she whispered, "it's all here. The entire collection. I heard rumors, but never thought." She moved to the nearest shelf, examining a piece without touching it. This is the Moreno Swallowtail series. These pieces were commissioned in 1993 and disappeared immediately after completion. The art world thought they'd been sold to a private collector in Japan. She turned to Claire, her expression odd. "Ms. Morrison, do you understand what you have here? This isn't just valuable art. This is cultural heritage. Some of these pieces are the only examples of their kind. Museums have been searching for these works for decades." Over the next week, Dr. Vasquez and her team conducted a complete authentication and appraisal. They brought in specialists, took high-resolution photographs, consulted with museums and auction houses. The sanctuary filled with people, experts, technicians, security guards. The final appraisal came back higher than Theodore's estimate, $518 million. Accounting for market appreciation and the discovery of 3 additional pieces Theodore hadn't cataloged. The news somehow leaked within 24 hours. Claire's phone, which she'd had to get reactivated with better service, started ringing constantly. Art dealers, auction houses, museums, collectors. Everyone wanted the collection. Everyone had an offer. Most were insultingly low. $75 million. $100 million. One dealer had the audacity to offer $150 million with a condescending speech about how she should be grateful for the opportunity. But others were worse. Anonymous calls threatening lawsuits. Strangers claiming Theodore had promised them pieces before he died. A man who showed up drunk one evening, screaming that the collection belonged to him, that he'd been Theodore's business partner and deserved half of everything. Security had to escort him away, but he parked at the end of the driveway for 3 days, watching the property before finally leaving. Claire's sister Emma called from Oregon. They hadn't spoken in 2 years, not since Claire had asked to borrow money for Lily's emergency room visit and Emma had refused. "I heard about your inheritance," Emma said, her voice dripping with false warmth. "That's wonderful, Claire. Really wonderful. And, I was thinking family should stick together. I have some time off next month. Maybe I could come visit. Help you manage everything." "Manage everything?" Claire repeated. "You mean help me sell everything?" "Well, you can't possibly keep all that art. It wouldn't be practical. And if you sell, we should split it evenly. Family inheritance should be shared among all the relatives." "Theodore left it to me, Emma. Not to us." "That's so selfish, Claire. After everything I've done for you. You refused to lend me $300 when Lily broke her arm. Don't pretend this is about family." Claire hung up and immediately got another call. This one from her ex-husband, Derek. "Hey, babe," he said, as if he hadn't abandoned them 3 years ago. "I heard you came into some money. That's great. Really great. Listen, I'm between jobs right now, and I was thinking, Lily's my daughter too. I should be involved in decisions about her future. We should talk about custody arrangements." Claire's hand tightened on the phone. "You haven't sent a dime of child support in 3 years. You haven't called. You haven't sent a birthday card. And now you want custody. I'm her father, Claire. I have rights. And if you're suddenly rich, well, maybe a judge would think Lily deserves to share that wealth with both her parents." The threat was clear. Play along or he'd sue for custody, tie her up in expensive legal battles, force her to spend millions defending her right to raise her own daughter. Claire ended the call, hands shaking with rage. That evening, she sat with Lily on the steps outside Theodore's apartment, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and gold. Butterflies, real ones, dozens of them now, clustered on the broken glass of the conservatory. "Everyone wants the butterflies," Lily said quietly. She'd heard enough to understand what was happening, even if she didn't grasp the full scope. "They want to take them away." "Yes," Claire admitted. "A lot of people do, but they're not theirs. Theodore gave them to you. To us." "I know, baby. So we don't have to give them away, right? We can keep them." Claire pulled her daughter close. "It's complicated. Keeping them means dealing with insurance and security and taxes. It means fighting off people who think they have better claims. It means being brave," Lily interrupted. "Like the butterflies. They're brave when they break out of the chrysalis, right? They can stay safe inside, but they break out even though it's scary." Claire felt tears burn her eyes. When had her 7-year-old become so wise? The attacks escalated. Someone cut the power one night, plunging the entire property into darkness. Security found evidence of attempted break-ins at 3 different points on the perimeter. The local police increased patrols, but they were understaffed and the sanctuary was isolated. Then came a lawsuit. Not from Derek. He'd apparently decided the legal route was too slow. But from someone worse. A man named Gerald Hartwell filed papers claiming to be Theodore's nephew and rightful heir. He produced documents showing he'd been in contact with Theodore, that they'd discussed the collection, that Theodore had verbally promised him pieces. "It's all fabricated," Sterling assured Claire. "We'll fight it, but it'll take time and money." More lawsuits followed. A former business partner claimed Theodore owed him money and the collection should be sold to satisfy the debt. An ex-girlfriend from the 1990s claimed Theodore had given her verbal ownership of specific pieces as gifts. Each lawsuit was frivolous. Each would eventually be dismissed, but each cost money to defend against, and each added to the growing sense that Claire was under siege. The media found the story. "Waitress inherits $500 million butterfly collection," ran on local news. Then regional, then national. Reporters camped at the end of the driveway. Helicopters flew overhead, trying to get footage of the property. Claire stopped leaving the sanctuary except for essential trips. She had groceries delivered. She homeschooled Lily. They lived like prisoners in their own home. One morning, Claire woke to find graffiti spray painted across the main conservatory. "Greedy bitch. Share the wealth." The next day, someone threw a rock through one of the few remaining intact glass panels, shattering it and destroying part of the original structure. Claire stood in the conservatory amid broken glass, tears streaming down her face. This was supposed to be a gift, a miracle, a second chance at life. Instead, it had become a nightmare. "Maybe we should sell," she whispered to Sterling during an emergency meeting. "Just sell it all and disappear. Start over somewhere else." "That's what they want," the attorney replied. "The dealers, the opportunists, the people filing lawsuits, they're trying to break you. Make you so desperate you'll accept a fraction of what the collection is worth just to make the pressure stop." "It's working." Claire. Sterling used her first name, which he rarely did. If you sell under pressure, you're validating their tactics. You're teaching your daughter that bullies win. Is that what you want? That night, Claire couldn't sleep. She walked through the sanctuary, the beam of her flashlight illuminating broken displays and forgotten corners. She ended up in the chrysalis chamber, sitting among the golden sculptures that had brought so much trouble into her life. She picked up one piece, Monarch No. 7, the one she discovered first. It was beautiful. The craftsmanship was extraordinary. Every detail of a real monarch chrysalis was captured in gold and emerald, transformed from nature's temporary shelter into permanent art. Theodore had spent 30 years collecting these pieces, not as an investment, not to make money, but because he loved them, because they represented transformation and beauty and the incredible process by which something earthbound became something that could fly. Claire thought about her own transformation. A month ago, she'd been a waitress facing eviction, working 2 jobs and barely surviving. Now she was under siege, fighting off lawsuits and threats, protecting treasures she'd never asked for. But she was also free. Free from worrying about rent. Free from double shifts and grease-stained uniforms and condescending managers. Free to make choices about her life instead of just reacting to circumstances. Theodore had given her that freedom, had seen something in her, a great niece he'd never met, that made him believe she was worth trusting with his life's passion. And what was she doing? Thinking about selling it all to make the pressure stop. No. Claire stood up, clutching the golden chrysalis. No more. She returned to the apartment and woke Lily. Baby, I need to ask you something important. Do you want to stay here? At the sanctuary? Even though it's hard and scary sometimes? Lily rubbed sleep from her eyes. Do you want to stay? I asked you first. Then yes. I want to stay. This is our home. Theodore wanted us to have it. And Mom, the butterflies are coming back. More every day. They know this place is special. We can't leave them. Claire hugged her daughter fiercely. Okay then. We stay. And we fight. The next morning, Claire called a press conference. The reporters who'd been camped outside scrambled to set up cameras and microphones. Dr. Vasquez stood beside Claire, lending academic credibility. Sterling stood on her other side, representing legal authority. Claire wore the nicest clothes she owned, a dress she'd bought at a thrift store for job interviews, and held her head high. My name is Claire Morrison, she began, her voice carrying across the assembled crowd. 6 weeks ago, I inherited the Hartwell Butterfly Sanctuary from my great-uncle Theodore Hartwell, a man I never had the chance to know. Along with this property, I inherited a collection of butterfly and insect art that has been appraised at over $500 million. Cameras clicked furiously. Reporters shouted questions. Since that discovery became public, I've been contacted by dozens of art dealers, auction houses, and collectors. I've been offered amounts ranging from $50 million to $300 million for the collection. I've also been sued by people claiming they have rights to the art. I've been threatened, harassed, and vandalized. Claire paused, letting that sink in. I'm here today to make an announcement. I am not selling the collection. Not for $50 million, not for $300 million, not for any amount. The Hartwell collection will stay exactly where Theodore Hartwell wanted it. Here, at the sanctuary he built. The reporters erupted. Claire held up her hand for silence. Theodore spent 30 years collecting these pieces. He hid them throughout this property to protect them. He could have sold them at any point. Instead, he chose to preserve them, to keep them together, and ultimately to give them to me with one instruction: create something beautiful. That's what I intend to do. I'm establishing the Hartwell Foundation for Natural History and Conservation. The Butterfly Art Collection will be the foundation's endowment. We'll use the value, not by selling pieces, but by leveraging them for funding, to restore this sanctuary and reopen it to the public. Dr. Vasquez stepped forward. I'm Dr. Elena Vasquez from the Getty Museum, and I'm proud to announce that we'll be partnering with Ms. Morrison on this project. The Hartwell collection is culturally significant. It deserves to be seen, studied, and appreciated. Through this partnership, we'll create rotating exhibitions while keeping the collection intact. A reporter shouted, Ms. Morrison, you could be wealthy beyond imagination if you sold. Why give that up? Claire looked directly at the camera. Because some things are worth more than money. This collection represents Theodore's life passion. This sanctuary represented his dream. And I have a 7-year-old daughter who deserves to learn that not everything in the world is for sale. That sometimes you fight for what matters instead of taking the easy way out. Another reporter, what about the lawsuits? Sterling stepped forward. Every claim filed against Ms. Morrison and the estate has been investigated. All are without merit. We're prepared to defend Ms. Morrison's legal ownership in court and to countersue for harassment if necessary. Ms. Morrison, a third reporter called, some have criticized you for not sharing the inheritance with other family members. How do you respond? Claire's jaw tightened. Theodore Hartwell had every legal right to leave his property to whomever he chose. He chose me. That was his decision to make. And I'm choosing to honor his legacy by keeping his collection intact and sharing it with the world through the foundation and the sanctuary. She paused. As for family members who've suddenly appeared after decades of silence, asking for money they didn't earn and showing interest they never had when Theodore was alive, they can contact my attorney. But they should know that Theodore's will was crystal clear and will be defended. The press conference lasted another 30 minutes. Claire answered questions about the collection, the sanctuary's planned restoration, and the Foundation's mission. Through it all, she remained calm, composed, and absolutely certain. When it was over and the reporters finally left, Claire collapsed in a chair in Theodore's office. Her hands were shaking, her heart was racing, but she felt something she hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. Sterling poured her a glass of water. That was impressive. You essentially told the entire art world to back off. Will it work? Probably not with everyone, but you've established your position publicly. You've got the Getty support, which is huge, and you've made it clear you're not some desperate waitress who can be bullied into a bad deal. I was a desperate waitress, Claire said quietly. 6 weeks ago, I was 2 months behind on rent and didn't know how I'd feed my daughter. You were never just a waitress, Claire. You were a survivor, and that's exactly what Theodore saw in you. Over the next week, something shifted. The frivolous lawsuits began to be dismissed. Gerald Hartwell's claim was revealed as complete fabrication. He wasn't even related to Theodore. The ex-girlfriend's suit was thrown out when her evidence turned out to be forged letters. Derek called again, but this time his lawyer was with him. Sterling handled the call. When it was over, he informed Claire that Derek had agreed to sign away all parental rights in exchange for a one-time payment of $50,000. It's probably more than he deserves, Sterling said, but it removes him from Lily's life permanently. No more custody threats. No more using her as leverage. Claire thought about it for all of 10 seconds. Pay him. Get in writing. I never want him near her again. The vandalism stopped after Claire hired former military security to patrol the property 24/7. The reporters moved on to other stories. The phone calls became less frequent. And slowly, carefully, Claire began to breathe again. Dr. Vasquez returned with a team from the Getty to do detailed documentation of every piece. They create a comprehensive catalog, photograph everything, and establish the Foundation's official collection record. This is museum-quality curation, Dr. Vasquez explained as her team worked. Every piece properly documented, insured, and protected. The Getty will help with storage recommendations, climate control, security measures, everything you need to preserve the collection in perpetuity. How much will all this cost? Claire asked, thinking of the dwindling cash reserves in the estate account. The Foundation will cover it. Once we announce your partnership with the Getty and publish the catalog, donors will line up. Everyone wants to be associated with a collection this significant. You'll have more funding than you need. Claire watched the team work, photographing a delicate platinum and sapphire swallowtail, and felt something unknot in her chest. This was real. This was actually happening. She wasn't going to lose everything. She was going to keep it, protect it, share it. That evening, she and Lily walked through the conservatory with flashlights, examining the damage and planning repairs. We'll need to replace all the broken glass, Claire said, making notes on her tablet, and restore the gardens. Bring in new plants. Create proper habitats for different butterfly species. Can we get a waterfall? Lily asked, pointing to the dry water feature. With real water and plants around it. We could do whatever we want, baby. This is our place now. They climbed to the upper level of the conservatory where windows looked out over the valley. The sun was setting, painting everything gold and purple. And on every remaining piece of glass, butterflies clustered. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds. Painted ladies, red admirals, morning cloaks, and others Claire couldn't identify. They covered the glass like living stained glass windows, their wings opening and closing slowly in the fading light. Mom, Lily whispered, look how many there are. They're coming back, Claire said, wonder in her voice. The sanctuary's been empty for 5 years, but they're coming back. Because they know, Lily said with complete certainty. They know we're going to fix their home. They're waiting for us. Claire pulled out her phone and took photos, capturing the butterflies silhouetted against the sunset. Then she sent one to Sterling with a message. "This is why we fight." His response came immediately. "This is why we win." That night, for the first time since discovering the collection, Claire slept soundly. No nightmares about lawsuits or break-ins. No anxiety about money or threats. Just deep, peaceful sleep in Theodore's apartment with Lily curled beside her and the sound of wind through broken glass like breathing. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. There was still so much work to do. The foundation to establish formally. The sanctuary to restore. The collection to protect. Partnerships to build with museums and conservation organizations. But tonight, Claire let herself rest. Let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, Theodore had been right to choose her. That maybe she did have what it took to protect his legacy and build something beautiful from the ruins he'd left behind. In the chrysalis chamber, the golden sculptures gleamed in the darkness, patient and eternal. Outside, real butterflies slept among the broken glass, waiting for spring, waiting for transformation, waiting for the sanctuary to live again. And somewhere in all of this, in the art, in the insects, in the broken glass, and the possibility, Theodore's dream was stirring back to life, ready to emerge from its chrysalis and finally fly. The restoration began in early spring, 6 months after Claire had discovered the collection. The winter had been long and difficult, spent fighting lawsuits and establishing the foundation's legal structure. But now, with the legal battles mostly won and the Giddy partnership formalized, real work could finally begin. Claire stood in the main conservatory with the architect she'd hired, a woman named Sarah Chen who specialized in historic glass structures. Sarah walked the perimeter, making notes on her tablet, occasionally stopping to examine the framework or test the integrity of remaining panels. "The bones are solid," Sarah announced after her inspection. "Theodore built this to last. The metal framework is still structurally sound. We can restore it to original condition, maybe even improve on his design in places where modern materials would work better." "How long will it take?" Claire asked. "Full restoration? 8 to 10 months if we push hard. We'll need to replace probably 70% of the glass panels. Rebuild the gardens completely. Update all the climate control systems. But when we're done, this place will be exactly what Theodore envisioned. Maybe better. Better how?" Sarah smiled. "Theodore built this in 1987. Technology's come a long way. We can install UV filtering glass that protects the butterflies but lets in natural light. Better ventilation systems. More efficient heating and cooling. Solar panels on the support buildings to offset energy costs. We can make this place state-of-the-art while keeping its original character." Over the next week, contractors began arriving. Glass specialists from San Francisco, landscapers who understood native plants and butterfly habitats, engineers to assess and upgrade the water features and climate control systems. The sanctuary buzzed with activity for the first time in years. Lily was fascinated by everything. She followed the workers around, asking endless questions, learning about glass installation and plant propagation and irrigation systems. The contractors adopted her as a kind of mascot, teaching her skills and letting her help with small tasks. "Your daughter's got a natural curiosity," the head landscaper, a man named Miguel, told Claire one afternoon. "She asked better questions than some of my college interns." Claire watched Lily carefully transplanting seedlings under Miguel's supervision, her small hands gentle and precise. "She's been through a lot this year. I think the work grounds her, gives her something concrete to focus on." "Kids are resilient," Miguel observed, "more than we give them credit for. My daughter, she's about Lily's age, lost her mother 2 years ago to cancer. I thought she'd never smile again, but she did. They find their way through." Claire felt a kinship with this man she'd just met. Single parents, both of them doing their best. "I'm sorry about your wife. I'm sorry about the trouble you've had with all this." Miguel gestured at the sanctuary. "I read about it. The lawsuits and everything. People trying to take what wasn't theirs. It's mostly over now, thankfully. That's good, because this place, what you're doing here, it matters. My daughter, when I told her about this job, about helping restore a butterfly sanctuary, she got so excited. Asked if she could come see it when it's done. That's the first time in 2 years she's asked to do something that wasn't just about missing her mom. Claire felt tears threaten. Bring her anytime. Once we're open, I mean. Bring her, and she can have a private tour. I'll show her everything. Miguel's eyes crinkled with gratitude. She'd love that. Thank you. These moments of connection happened frequently as work progressed. The glass installer whose son had autism and found peace watching butterflies. The electrician whose grandmother had brought him to the sanctuary as a child before it closed. The painter who was recovering from addiction and found meaning in restoration work. Each person working on the sanctuary had a story. Each one connected to Theodore's dream in some way. And each one became part of the growing community forming around the property. The Getty Museum announced the partnership officially with a press release and planned exhibition. Metamorphosis. The Theodore Hartwell collection would open in 18 months, featuring 50 pieces from the collection in a major show that would travel to 5 museums over 3 years. Dr. Vasquez called Claire with the news. We've never had this kind of response to an exhibition announcement. The art world is fascinated. And more importantly, the funding is pouring in. Donors want to support the foundation. Corporate sponsors want their names attached. Claire, you're going to have more money than you know what to do with. That's not possible, Claire laughed. I already have a list of projects a mile long. Good, because I'm adding to it. The Getty wants to fund a conservation program. Train the next generation of butterfly researchers. We're thinking internships, fellowships, maybe eventually a full research center at the sanctuary. Claire sat down, overwhelmed. A research center? Why not? You have a space. You have a collection as an educational resource. And you have something most research centers don't, a real, functioning ecosystem where butterflies live and breed. Theodore started something here. Claire, you're building on it. Let's build big. The sanctuary's reopening was scheduled for September, exactly 1 year after Claire had first arrived. The timing was symbolic. Butterflies migrating south for winter, life cycles completing, transformation made visible. But before the public opening, there was work to do beyond just physical restoration. Claire needed to build relationships with the local community, establish the foundation's programs, and hire staff to run the facility. The hiring process was harder than Claire expected. She needed people who understood butterflies, conservation, education, and visitor management. People who could be trusted with a facility housing $500 million in art. People who shared Theodore's vision. She interviewed dozens of candidates. Some were overqualified, making her suspicious of their motives. Others were underqualified, passionate but lacking necessary skills. Then she met James Okafor. James was a retired biology teacher, 63 years old, with a PhD in entomology and 30 years of experience teaching high school students about insects and ecology. He was soft-spoken, thoughtful, and when Claire asked why he wanted to work at the sanctuary, his answer made her decision easy. I taught for 30 years, James said, his voice carrying the weight of decades in classrooms. Try to show kids that the natural world was worth paying attention to, worth protecting. But it's hard to compete with phones and video games and all the noise of modern life. Then one day, I brought my students here, to this sanctuary back in 2015, just before it closed. And I watched them transform. Kids who couldn't sit still for 5 minutes stood perfectly quiet, watching butterflies emerge from chrysalises. Kids who said they hated science asked questions about metamorphosis and migration. This place changed them, changed how they saw the world. He paused, his eyes distant with memory. I want to be part of bringing that back. I want other teachers to bring their students here. I want kids to stand in the middle of butterflies and realize there's magic in the world that doesn't require batteries or screens. Claire hired him as education director on the spot. Together, they built a team. A butterfly habitat manager with experience at zoos and conservancies. A visitor services coordinator who'd worked at national parks. A maintenance supervisor who understood both historic buildings and modern systems. And crucially, a security director who'd protected art museums and knew how to balance public access with collection protection. By summer, the sanctuary was unrecognizable from the ruin Claire had inherited. The glass panels gleamed, newly installed and sparkling in the sun. The gardens overflowed with nectar plants and host plants for dozens of butterfly species. Water features burbled and splashed. Climate-controlled exhibits showcased butterflies from around the world: monarchs, swallowtails, blue morphos, and hundreds of other species. And throughout the facility, carefully integrated into the design, the art collection was displayed. Not all of it. Most pieces remained in the secure vault, rotating through museum exhibitions and carefully controlled viewings. But select pieces were visible to visitors, protected by specialized cases with climate control and security systems, creating moments where art and nature merged into something transcendent. Claire walked through the completed sanctuary the night before opening day, Lily beside her, both of them speechless with wonder. "Mom," Lily whispered, "it's like walking through a dream." She was right. The main conservatory glowed with soft lighting that mimicked moonlight. Butterflies settled on plants, their wings folded for sleep. The air was warm and humid, filled with the scent of flowers and earth. And in carefully placed display cases, golden chrysalis sculptures caught the light, their precious metals and gems glowing like captured stars. "Theodore would be proud," Claire said softly. "We did it, baby. We brought his dream back to life." Opening day arrived with perfect weather. Sunny, warm, with a light breeze that made the trees surrounding the sanctuary rustle like applause. Claire stood at the entrance, wearing a dress she'd bought specifically for this occasion. Not from a thrift store this time, but from a real boutique, paid for with foundation money because Dr. Vasquez had insisted the founder needed to look the part. The first visitors arrived at 10. A family with 3 children, wide-eyed and excited. An elderly couple holding hands, who'd visited the sanctuary in the 1990s and never thought they'd see it open again. A group of art students from the local college, there to see the collection as much as the butterflies. Claire greeted each person personally, handing out brochures and maps, explaining the foundation's mission and Theodore's legacy. Within an hour, hundreds of people filled the sanctuary, their voices mixing with the sound of water and the flutter of butterfly wings. James led educational tours, teaching children about metamorphosis and life cycles. Miguel showed visitors the native plant gardens, explaining which species attracted which butterflies. The entire staff moved through the crowds, answering questions, sharing knowledge, making everyone feel welcome. At noon, Claire gave a speech in the main conservatory. Press was there, TV cameras, reporters with notebooks, but also regular people who'd come because they'd heard about this place and wanted to experience it. "Thank you all for being here," Claire began, her voice amplified by the microphone, but still carrying that same uncertainty she'd had 6 months ago at her first press conference. Except now, standing in the restored sanctuary, surrounded by life and beauty and the tangible proof of what she'd built, the uncertainty felt less like weakness and more like humility. A year ago, I inherited this sanctuary from a man I never knew. My great-uncle Theodore Hartwell spent his life loving butterflies and collecting art that celebrated them. When I arrived here, this place was broken, abandoned, a ruin. She gestured around at the gleaming glass and flourishing gardens. What you see now is the work of dozens of people who believed in Theodore's vision. Contractors who donated hours, artists who loaned pieces, the Getty Museum, which partnered with us, and my daughter Lily, who reminded me every day that some things are worth fighting for. Lily stood near the front, beaming with pride. Claire smiled at her before continuing. "This sanctuary exists because Theodore believed transformation was possible. He watched caterpillars become butterflies thousands of times. He understood that change is hard, often painful, but ultimately beautiful. He understood that sometimes you have to protect something through its darkest period so it can emerge and fly." Claire's voice grew stronger. "When people try to buy the collection, to break it apart and sell it off piece by piece, I almost let them. I was tired and scared and overwhelmed. But then I remembered what metamorphosis actually means. It means struggle. It means patience. It means believing that what looks dead is just transforming. She pulled a small object from her pocket. Monarch number 7. The first piece she discovered, the golden chrysalis that had started everything. She held it up so everyone could see. This piece represents Theodore's life work, but it also represents something bigger. It represents the idea that beauty is worth protecting, that some things shouldn't be sold to the highest bidder, that we have a responsibility to preserve what matters and share it with others. Claire carefully returned the sculpture to its display case. The Hartwell Butterfly Sanctuary is now open to everyone. The collection will be shared through museum partnerships and educational programs. And this place, this beautiful place that Theodore built, will serve as a reminder that transformation is possible. For butterflies, for buildings, and for people. The applause was thunderous. People cheered, cameras flashed, and for a moment Claire felt what Theodore must have felt, the pure joy of creating something meaningful and sharing it with the world. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Thousands of visitors came through. Social media exploded with photos and videos. Butterflies landing on outstretched hands, children pressing their faces against glass to watch chrysalises, people crying at the beauty of the art pieces displayed among living flowers. By evening, when the last visitors finally left and Claire locked the doors, she was exhausted but elated. The staff gathered in the education center for an impromptu celebration. Someone had brought champagne. Someone else had ordered pizza. They sat around eating and laughing and sharing stories from the day. Did you see the little girl who cried when a monarch landed on her? One of the habitat managers said. She just stood there with tears running down her face, whispering, "It's so beautiful." I had a guy who came specifically to see the Moreno swallowtail sculpture, another staff member added. He'd studied it in art history class 20 years ago and never thought he'd see it in person. He stood there for 40 minutes just staring at it. Stories poured out, moments of wonder and connection. A veteran with PTSD who said the sanctuary was the first place he'd felt peace in years. A woman undergoing cancer treatment who brought her grandchildren to show them something beautiful. A teenager who'd been considering dropping out of school, but left inspired to study entomology. Each story reinforced what Claire was building here. Not just a tourist attraction, not just a museum, but a place where people could encounter transformation in all its forms. Later, after everyone had gone home and Lily was asleep in their apartment, they moved into a larger space Theodore had built but never used. Claire returned to the chrysalis chamber alone. She sat among the golden sculptures, thinking about the journey that had brought her here. A year ago, she'd been facing eviction, working herself to exhaustion, seeing no path forward. Now she ran a foundation, managed a multi-million-dollar collection, employed a staff of 15, and had reopened a sanctuary that would touch thousands of lives. It felt impossible, like someone else's life, like she was living inside a dream that would dissolve if she examined it too closely. But it was real. The sculptures surrounding her were real. The restored sanctuary was real. The second chance Theodore had given her was real. Claire pulled out her phone and opened the photos she'd taken throughout the day. Lily showing a group of children how to identify butterfly species. James giving an animated lecture about migration patterns. Visitors pressed against glass, faces full of wonder. And in every photo, butterflies. Hundreds of them. Thousands, maybe. They'd returned to the sanctuary in astonishing numbers, as if they'd been waiting for someone to restore their home. Monarchs and painted ladies, swallowtails and admirals, species Claire was still learning to identify. Theodore's collection was worth $500 million. But these living butterflies, freely flying through the conservatory, they were priceless. They were what Theodore had really been trying to preserve all along. Claire's phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Vasquez. Saw the news coverage. The sanctuary looks magnificent. Theodore would be so proud. You did it, Claire. You really did it. Another text, this one from Sterling. Congratulations on a successful opening. All the legal matters are now fully resolved. The foundation is secure. You can finally breathe. More texts followed, from staff members thanking her for the opportunity, from visitors who'd attended the opening, from Miguel sending a photo of his daughter smiling, asking when they could visit. Claire turned off her phone and sat in silence. letting the day's events wash over her. She'd won. Against all odds, against people who tried to take everything, against her own doubts and fears, she'd won. The collection was safe. The sanctuary was restored. The foundation was established. And most importantly, Lily was thriving, growing up in a place of beauty and wonder instead of struggle and scarcity. In the weeks following the opening, the sanctuary exceeded every expectation. Attendance was triple what Claire had projected. School groups booked field trips months in advance. The gift shop couldn't keep merchandise in stock, and the foundation received donation requests from individuals wanting to support the work. More significantly, the Getty exhibition generated unprecedented interest. Metamorphosis, the Theodore Hartwell collection, became one of the most anticipated art shows in recent memory. Advance tickets sold out within days. Art critics called it essential viewing and a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to see works that have been hidden for decades. The success brought new opportunities. A documentary filmmaker wanted to make a film about Theodore, the collection, and Claire's journey. Major universities expressed interest in establishing research partnerships. Conservation organizations wanted to collaborate on butterfly breeding programs. Claire found herself traveling to meetings and conferences, speaking to donors and potential partners, representing the foundation at events. It was overwhelming at times, but she was learning to negotiate, learning to present, learning to be the kind of leader the foundation needed. But she never forgot where she'd come from. She kept her old waitress uniform hanging in her closet as a reminder. She maintained relationships with people from her previous life, the other struggling parents at Lily's old school, the co-workers from the diner who'd covered her shifts when she was desperate. And she used the foundation's resources to help them. Scholarships for their children, grants for community programs in underfunded neighborhoods, jobs at the sanctuary for people who needed second chances, the way Theodore had given her one. 6 months after opening, Claire established the Hartwell Fellowship Program. It funded full scholarships for students from low-income backgrounds who wanted to study entomology, ecology, or environmental science. The first cohort was 20 students. By the second year, it would be 50. Eventually, Claire hoped hundreds. "You're building an empire," Dr. Vasquez observed during one of their regular meetings. The sanctuary, the collection, the research programs, the fellowships. Theodore started with butterflies. You're creating an entire ecosystem of support for conservation and education. Is that bad? Claire worried. Am I doing too much? You're doing exactly what you should be doing. You're thinking big. Theodore thought small. One sanctuary, one collection, one dream. You're thinking about systemic change, about creating opportunities for hundreds of people, about building something that will last long after we're all gone. That night, Claire updated Theodore's journal. She'd found it in his desk months ago and had started adding her own entries, documenting the sanctuary's restoration and the foundation's growth. It felt right, continuing his story. "Dear Theodore," she wrote, "today we announce the fellowship program that will bear your name. 20 students will receive full scholarships to study conservation and entomology. Some of them come from backgrounds like mine, poverty, struggle, limited options. Now, they'll have the chance to pursue their dreams because you collected butterfly art and trusted me to use it wisely. I still don't know why you chose me. We never met. You watched my life from a distance, but never reached out. Sometimes I'm angry about that. You could have helped when I was struggling. When Lily and I were eating ramen for every meal and I was terrified of being evicted. But you waited. You let me struggle until I was desperate enough to gamble on an inheritance I didn't understand. Maybe that was the point. Maybe you knew that if you'd just given me money, I wouldn't have fought for it the way I fought for the sanctuary. I wouldn't have valued it. Wouldn't have understood what it meant to protect something worth protecting. Or maybe you just didn't know how to connect with people, so you connected with butterflies instead. Spent your life watching them transform and hoping you could transform too. Either way, you gave me something I'll never stop being grateful for. Not just wealth, not just security, but purpose, a reason to be brave, a chance to build something beautiful. The sanctuary is full of butterflies now. They've come back in numbers even the experts find surprising. James says they're responding to the restored habitat, to the abundance of nectar and host plants. But I like to think they know. They know this place is protected. They know they're safe here. Thank you for seeing something in me that I didn't see in myself. Thank you for trusting me with your dream. I promise I'll keep protecting it. Keep sharing it. Keep making sure that everyone who needs transformation has a place to witness it. Your great niece, Claire. She closed the journal and set it back on the shelf beside Theodore's other volumes. Then she walked through the dark sanctuary one more time before bed, watching butterflies sleep among the plants, their wings folded and still. A year ago, Claire had arrived here with nothing but desperation and a 7-year-old daughter. Now she walked through a thriving sanctuary, past art worth $500 million, knowing she'd built something that mattered. Metamorphosis wasn't just about butterflies. It was about people too, about struggling and transforming and emerging into something new, something that could fly. Claire locked the sanctuary doors and returned to her apartment. Lily was asleep, her room decorated with butterfly posters and specimens in frames. On her desk, homework from the private school Claire could now afford, where Lily was thriving academically and socially. Claire's own room was simple but comfortable. She could afford luxury now, but found she didn't want it, didn't need it. The apartment was enough. The satisfaction of the work was enough. She climbed into bed and pulled out her phone one last time before sleep. A final check of emails, texts, messages. One caught her attention, from Emma, her sister who'd called demanding money months ago. Hi, Claire. I saw the documentary trailer. The sanctuary looks beautiful. I'm sorry for how I acted when I first heard about the inheritance. I was jealous, and I said things I didn't mean. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I wanted you to know I'm proud of what you've built, what you've done with Theodore's gift. You're amazing. Love, Emma. Claire read the message 3 times. She could respond now, or wait. Could hold on to anger, or choose forgiveness. She thought about what Theodore had written in his journals about isolation, about cutting people off, about the loneliness of self-protection. She typed a response. Thank you. It means a lot to hear from you. Maybe we could talk sometime? I'd like to rebuild what we lost. The sanctuary has taught me that transformation is always possible, even for relationships. Love, Claire. She hit send before she could second-guess it. Forgiveness was hard, but metamorphosis was hard too. That didn't make it less necessary. Sleep came easily that night. No anxiety about money. No fear of eviction. No wondering how she'd survive another day. Just peace and satisfaction and the quiet knowledge that she'd done something meaningful with the impossible gift she'd been given. Morning arrived with golden light streaming through the windows. Claire woke to find Lily already dressed and eating breakfast. Mom, can we go see if any butterflies emerged overnight? James said we might have monarchs today. Absolutely. Let me get dressed. They walked to the sanctuary hand in hand, past gardens that were flourishing under Miguel's care, past the conservatory with its gleaming glass panels. Inside, the habitat manager was already working, checking climate controls and documenting butterfly populations. And there, in the emergence chamber, 3 monarch butterflies hung from their empty chrysalises, wings still damp and crumpled, waiting for blood to pump through the veins and expand them into flight-ready glory. Look, Lily breathed. They're transforming right now. Claire knelt beside her daughter, both of them watching the miracle unfold. Slowly, over the course of an hour, the wings expanded and dried. The monarchs began to flutter, testing their new bodies, preparing for their first flight. It's like magic, Lily whispered. It's like life, Claire corrected gently. Hard and painful and absolutely worth it. When the monarchs finally took flight, Claire and Lily clapped and cheered. The habitat manager recorded the data, species, emergence time, wing condition, but Claire just watched them fly, thinking about transformation and second chances and the impossible journey that had brought her here. Later that day, the foundation held its first official board meeting. Claire had assembled a board of directors that included Dr. Vasquez, Sterling, a conservation biologist from Stanford, a philanthropist who supported environmental causes, and surprisingly, Emma, who'd called after Claire's forgiveness text and expressed interest in being involved. I know nothing about butterflies or art, Emma had admitted. But I understand fundraising and nonprofit management. And I want to help. I want to be part of your family again. So Claire had nominated her for the board, and the other directors had approved. Now Emma sat at the table, professional and engaged, contributing ideas about donor cultivation and grant writing. The meeting lasted 3 hours. They reviewed financial reports, discussed expansion plans, evaluated fellowship applications, and approved partnerships with new conservation organizations. It was tedious work, necessary work, the unglamorous reality of running a major foundation. But at the end, when they adjourned and walked through the sanctuary together, Emma pulled Claire aside. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, "for everything. For not being there when you needed me. For only showing up when you suddenly had money. I was jealous and bitter, and I took it out on you." "I know," Claire said. "I was angry for a while. But I'm learning that holding on to anger just makes you heavy. Makes it hard to fly." Emma laughed through tears. "When did you get so wise?" "When I inherited $500 million in butterfly art and had to figure out what to do with it." Claire smiled. "Desperation teaches you things." So does having a 7-year-old who sees the world more clearly than adults do. They hugged, and it felt like healing, like another kind of metamorphosis. Relationships emerging from chrysalises of hurt and distance, transformed into something new. The first year of operation ended with celebration. The sanctuary had welcomed over 200,000 visitors. The fellowship program had awarded 20 scholarships. The Getty exhibition had broken attendance records at 3 museums. And the foundation's endowment, carefully managed and supplemented by donations, had grown to over $600 million. Claire stood at the anniversary gala, surrounded by staff and supporters and people who'd become friends. She gave a short speech thanking everyone, celebrating their collective achievement, and laying out plans for year 2. But the moment that mattered most came later, when the crowd had dispersed and she walked through the empty sanctuary with Lily, just the two of them in the darkness. "Mom," Lily said, "do you ever think about what our life would be like if Theodore hadn't left us the sanctuary?" "Sometimes," Claire admitted. "We'd probably still be in that apartment. I'd still be waitressing. You'd still be in the same school with the broken playground and the teacher who didn't really care. But we wouldn't know how bad it was. We just think that was normal life." "That's true. Sometimes you don't realize you're in a chrysalis until you break out of it." They stood in front of the main display case, the one holding Monarch No. 7 and 30 other pieces from Theodore's collection. In the darkness, the gold and gems caught ambient light from outside, glowing softly like captured starlight. Theodore was lonely, Lily observed with the bluntness of childhood. That's why he collected butterflies instead of having friends. Maybe. Or maybe he found connection with butterflies in a way he couldn't with people. Do you think he was happy? Claire considered this. I think he was satisfied. He built something beautiful. He protected something valuable. And, at the end, he gave it to someone who would honor what he'd created. That's a kind of happiness. I want to be happy like that when I grow up. Not lonely, but creating something beautiful. You will be, baby. You already are. They stood together in the darkness, mother and daughter, surrounded by art and butterflies and the tangible proof that transformation was real, that struggling people could become successful, that broken places could be restored, that dreams could be protected and shared and multiplied into something even more beautiful than their original form. A year ago, Claire had been desperate. Now she was fulfilled. A year ago, she'd had nothing. Now she had purpose. The journey between those 2 points had been difficult, terrifying at times, requiring courage she didn't know she possessed. But she'd emerged, had broken free from the chrysalis of her old life, and flown into something new. And every day, the sanctuary reminded her that metamorphosis was always possible. For butterflies, for buildings, for people, for anyone brave enough to struggle through the transformation and emerge on the other side. Claire turned off the sanctuary lights and locked the doors. Tomorrow would bring new visitors, new challenges, new opportunities. But tonight, she just wanted to sleep peacefully in the home Theodore had given her, grateful for the impossible gift and the courage it had taken to keep it. Outside, Butterflies settled into sleep among the plants. Inside, golden sculptures gleamed in the darkness. And somewhere in the space between art and nature, memory and possibility, Theodore's dream lived on, transformed and multiplied by the woman he'd chosen to carry it forward. The chrysalis had opened. The butterfly had emerged. And now, finally, it was flying. Years would pass. The sanctuary would grow. The foundation would expand. Thousands of students would receive scholarships. Millions of people would walk through the conservatory and witness transformation. The collection would be studied, celebrated, preserved for future generations. But the core truth would remain the same. Theodore Hartwell had spent his life collecting beauty and ended it giving that beauty away to someone who needed it most. And Claire Morrison had taken that gift and transformed it into something even Theodore couldn't have imagined. Some legacies were written in gold and gems, but the best ones were written in courage, generosity, and the willingness to protect what mattered even when the whole world tried to take it away. Claire had learned that lesson, had lived it, had emerged from struggle into something that could fly. And every butterfly that lived in the sanctuary, every piece of art displayed in museums, every student awarded a fellowship, all of it testified to the same truth. Metamorphosis was real. Transformation was possible. And sometimes, if you were patient enough and brave enough and desperate enough to believe in impossible things, the chrysalis opened and you flew. 3 years after opening the sanctuary, Claire received a letter that would change everything again. It arrived on an ordinary Tuesday morning, delivered by a private courier who insisted she sign for it personally. The envelope was aged parchment, sealed with red wax, and bore a return address from Geneva, Switzerland. Inside was a handwritten letter on expensive stationery, dated just 2 weeks prior. Dear Ms. Morrison, my name is Helena Rousseau. I am the daughter of Maria Rousseau, the artist who created several pieces in Theodore Hartwell's collection. I am writing because my mother passed away last month, and in her final days, she revealed something extraordinary. Theodore's collection is incomplete. There is a 30th piece to the Metamorphosis suite that was never delivered. My mother created it in 2001, but Theodore died before taking possession. The piece has been in our family's vault for 24 years, waiting. According to my mother's wishes, it belongs with the rest of the collection. It belongs with you. I will be in California next month. May I visit the sanctuary and discuss this matter in person? Yours sincerely, Helena Rousseau. Claire read the letter 3 times, her heart racing. A missing piece. A 30th sculpture to complete Theodore's life's work. She immediately called Dr. Vasquez. That's impossible, Elena said when Claire explained. Theodore documented everything obsessively. If there was a 30th piece, he would have mentioned it. He would have cataloged it. Maybe he died before he could, Claire suggested. The letter says Maria created it in 2001 and Theodore died in early 2002. What if he commissioned it but never received it? Then why did Maria keep it for 24 years? Why not sell it or donate it to a museum? I don't know, but Helena is coming here next month. I need to be prepared. Can you help me research this? Over the next 3 weeks, Elena and her team at the Giddy Dove into Theodore's archives. They found correspondence with Maria Rousseau dating back to 1987, when Theodore had commissioned his first piece from her. The letters showed a deep professional relationship that evolved into friendship over the years. But in late 2000, the tone changed. Theodore's letters became urgent, almost desperate. He referenced the final piece and completing the vision and running out of time. Maria's responses were cautious, warning Theodore that what he was asking for was dangerous, that some transformations shouldn't be captured in art. What does that mean? Claire asked when Elena showed her the correspondence. Dangerous? They're butterfly sculptures. What's dangerous about that? I have no idea. But whatever Theodore commissioned, Maria was reluctant to create it. The final letter in the archive was from Theodore, dated December 15, 2001, just weeks before his death. My dear Maria, I understand your hesitation. What I'm asking is unconventional, perhaps even transgressive. But I need this piece to complete the collection. Not for me, but for whoever inherits it. They'll need to understand the full cycle, not just egg to caterpillar to chrysalis to butterfly, but also death to decay to rebirth. The metamorphosis suite cannot end with emergence. It must include what comes after flight ends. Please, Maria, I'm dying. I'll never see it displayed, never see the collection complete, but I need to know it exists. That somewhere, someone will understand what I was trying to preserve. Your friend always, Theodore. Claire felt chills reading those words. Death to decay, to rebirth. What was he talking about? I think, Elena said slowly, Theodore wanted Maria to create a piece showing the final stage of butterfly life. The death stage. Most art celebrates life and transformation. Theodore wanted to show the complete cycle, including the end. That's morbid. That's honest. Butterflies live days or weeks or months, depending on species. They all die, and their deaths feed the ecosystem, nurture the plants, become part of the cycle that allows new butterflies to emerge. Theodore understood that. He wanted the collection to reflect that truth. Helena Russo arrived on a cool October morning. She was in her late 50s, elegant and composed, with her mother's eyes, dark and penetrating, the eyes of an artist who saw beneath surfaces. She arrived with 2 assistants and a large wooden crate that required careful handling. Claire met her in the sanctuary's private viewing room, the secure space used for examining high-value pieces. Elena was there, along with Sterling and James, who'd become Claire's most trusted advisors. Ms. Morrison, Helena said, extending her hand. Thank you for seeing me. Please call me Claire. I'm sorry about your mother. Her work in the collection is extraordinary. She was extraordinary in all ways. Helena's voice caught slightly, which is why I'm here. My mother carried the weight of this piece for 24 years. She never showed it publicly, never even showed it to our family until her final days. She said Theodore was the only person who truly understood what she'd created, and he died before seeing it. Helena gestured to her assistants, who carefully began opening the crate. My mother told me that when Theodore commissioned this piece, he was already sick. He knew he was dying, and he wanted one final sculpture that captured something no one else in the art world was willing to acknowledge. That metamorphosis includes death. That transformation isn't always about becoming something more. Sometimes it's about becoming nothing, so that something else can grow. The crate opened. Inside, wrapped in layers of protective material, was a sculpture unlike anything Claire had seen in Theodore's collection. It was a dead butterfly, not stylized or romanticized, but realistic in every detail. The wings were spread as if the butterfly had died in flight and fallen to earth. One wing was torn. The body was skeletal, delicate. The entire piece was crafted from materials that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Dark metals, black diamonds, obsidian, materials that spoke of endings rather than beginnings. But beneath the dead butterfly, Maria had created something else. From the butterfly's body, tiny filaments of gold emerged, spreading into the base of the sculpture like roots. And from those roots, the smallest suggestion of new growth. A single golden leaf, a tiny emerald bud, death feeding life, Helena said softly. The final transformation. My mother called it entropy and emergence. Theodore commissioned it for $15 million. He paid $7 million up front, but died before paying the remainder. My mother never pursued the debt. She said the piece was more Theodore's than hers, that he'd understood something she'd been trying to express her entire career. Claire couldn't look away from the sculpture. It was disturbing and beautiful simultaneously. It made her uncomfortable in a way the other pieces didn't, forced her to confront mortality and impermanence and the reality that all beauty eventually ends. Why now? Claire asked. Why bring it to me after all these years? Helena pulled out another letter, this one in Maria's handwriting. My mother wanted you to have this. She wrote it 2 weeks before she died. Claire took the letter and read. Dear Claire Morrison, I never met Theodore Hartwell in person. All our collaboration happened through correspondence. But in his letters, he revealed himself more honestly than most people do in face-to-face conversation. He was lonely, brilliant and passionate and deeply lonely. He built this sanctuary as a kind of cathedral, a place where beauty could be worshipped and protected. But he also understood that beauty is temporary, that butterflies live for days or weeks, that even the most magnificent art eventually crumbles or fades. He commissioned the Metamorphosis Suite to capture transformation, but he wanted the final piece to acknowledge that transformation never stops, that even death is a kind of metamorphosis, feeding the next cycle. I created Entropy and Emergence as a meditation on endings and beginnings, on how they're inseparable. I kept it all these years because I was afraid people wouldn't understand, afraid they'd see only the death and miss the rebirth beneath it. But Theodore understood. And from what I've read about you, I believe you understand too. You fought to keep his collection intact when people wanted to break it apart and sell it. You turned the sanctuary into a place that celebrates life while acknowledging its fragility. You understand that some things are worth protecting, especially when they remind us that nothing lasts forever. Please accept this piece as the completion of Theodore's vision. Display it or keep it hidden as you see fit. But know that it represents what he understood at the end of his life, that building something beautiful doesn't stop death, but does give death meaning. It becomes part of the cycle rather than the end of it. With respect and admiration, Maria Russo. Claire's eyes burned with tears. She looked at the sculpture again, at the dead butterfly and the golden roots and the tiny promise of new growth, and suddenly understood what Theodore had been trying to do. He knew he was dying, Claire said softly. He was building the collection as his own metamorphosis, transforming his wealth and passion into something that would outlive him. But he also needed to acknowledge that even his dream would eventually end, that someday, centuries from now, the sanctuary will crumble and the collection will be dispersed, and everything he built will become nothing but roots feeding something else. Exactly, Helena confirmed. My mother said Theodore told her that the collection wasn't meant to be permanent. It was meant to be transformative, to change whoever inherited it, whoever curated it, whoever experienced it, and then, eventually, to transform into something else entirely. He wanted the final piece to remind people of that truth. Elena stepped closer to examine the sculpture. This is museum quality, beyond museum quality. With current market values, this piece alone is worth at least $30 million. I'm not asking for money, Helena said quickly. The piece belongs with the collection. I'm only asking that you display it as Theodore intended, as the final piece of the Metamorphosis Suite. Claire looked at Sterling. What do you think? The attorney studied the sculpture carefully. It's your decision. But consider this. Adding a piece worth $30 million to the collection increases insurance premiums, security requirements, and public expectations. You'd be accepting responsibility for another treasure. But it completes Theodore's vision, James added. And from an educational standpoint, this piece is vital. We teach children about butterfly life cycles, but we sanitize death. We pretend it's not part of the natural process. This sculpture forces us to confront that reality. Claire walked around the sculpture, examining it from every angle. The dead butterfly was disturbing, yes, but there was something profound about it, something that spoke to the core of what Theodore had been trying to say with his entire collection. I'll accept it, Claire decided, but I want to display it differently than the other pieces. Not in the main conservatory where children might find it traumatic, but in a special gallery, a place where people can choose to confront it, where they can sit with discomfort and think about endings and beginnings and how they're connected. My mother would approve, Helena said, relief evident in her voice. Thank you. The authentication process took 3 months. Maria's documentation was meticulous, proving the piece's provenance and establishing its place as the 30th and final sculpture in the Metamorphosis Suite. The Getty agreed to include it in the traveling exhibition's final stop. But before the piece could be publicly displayed, Claire wanted to understand it more deeply. She spent hours in the viewing room, sitting with the sculpture, letting it speak to her. Lily, now 10 years old and more articulate than most adults Claire knew, joined her one afternoon. "It's sad," Lily observed, studying the dead butterfly, "but also kind of hopeful because of the roots and the leaf." "That's exactly right," Claire said. "It's about how death isn't the end. It's just another transformation. Like how Theodore died, but the sanctuary is still alive." "Yes, and someday I'll die too, and you'll have to decide what to do with this place. And eventually you'll die, and someone else will take over. The sanctuary will keep transforming generation after generation, until maybe it's something completely different from what Theodore imagined." Lily was quiet, processing this. "Does that make you sad?" "Sometimes. I've worked so hard to build this exactly as Theodore wanted it. But the sculpture reminds me that holding on too tightly is its own kind of death. That real transformation requires letting go." "I think Theodore was smart," Lily announced. "He knew people like you want to keep everything perfect forever. So he left this piece to remind you that perfect isn't the point. Change is the point." Claire hugged her daughter, marveling at her wisdom. "When did you get so smart?" "I pay attention. You taught me that." The special gallery for entropy and emergence opened 6 months later. Claire designed it as a meditation space, small, intimate, with benches for sitting and soft lighting that encourage contemplation. A plaque explained Theodore's vision and Maria's creation, contextualizing the piece within the larger collection. The response was immediate and divided. Some visitors found it profound, sitting for hours with the sculpture, crying quietly, or writing in the journal Claire had provided for reflections. Others found it disturbing, wrong, inappropriate for a sanctuary that celebrated life and beauty. One reviewer wrote, "The Hartwell Sanctuary has always been a place of wonder and joy. Adding this morbid sculpture feels like a betrayal of that mission. Children come here to see butterflies, not contemplate death." Another wrote, "Finally, someone willing to show the complete cycle. Life and death aren't separate. This sculpture is the most honest piece of art I've seen in years. It should be required viewing." The controversy drove attendance up. People came specifically to see the piece that shouldn't exist, the sculpture that forced them to confront uncomfortable truths. The gallery became one of the most visited spaces in the sanctuary, second only to the main conservatory. But the real impact came from unexpected places. A hospice nurse wrote to Claire, explaining that she brought photos of the sculpture to patients in their final days. "It helps them understand that death isn't failure," the nurse explained, "that they're part of a cycle, that their lives will feed something new." A woman whose husband had died by suicide visited the gallery and sat for 6 hours. She left a note in the reflection journal. "For 2 years I've been angry that he left me, angry that he chose death over life. But this sculpture helped me understand that maybe death wasn't an ending for him. Maybe it was a transformation I couldn't see. I'm not at peace yet, but I'm starting to understand." These stories reached Claire regularly. Teachers who used the sculpture to discuss death with students who'd lost parents. Veterans processing trauma and survivors' guilt. Cancer patients facing their own mortality. The sculpture became something Theodore probably never imagined. Not just art, but a tool for healing. Meanwhile, the foundation continued expanding. By year 5, the sanctuary had welcomed over 1 million visitors. The fellowship program had awarded scholarships to 150 students. Research partnerships with universities had led to groundbreaking discoveries about butterfly conservation and climate change impacts on insect populations. But success brought new challenges. The sanctuary's popularity meant crowds, sometimes overwhelming crowds that stressed the butterfly populations. Infrastructure needed constant upgrading. Staff turnover required perpetual hiring and training. And the pressure to expand, to add new exhibits and programs, never stopped. Claire found herself exhausted, spread too thin across too many responsibilities. She was the foundation's director, the sanctuary's public face, a single mother to a growing daughter, and the protector of a collection worth over $500 million. Something had to give. The breaking point came during a particularly difficult week when everything went wrong simultaneously. A school group visiting the sanctuary released balloons inside the conservatory, despite clear rules against it. The balloons got caught in the ventilation system, requiring emergency maintenance. Then a pipe burst in the basement, flooding storage areas and threatening documents Theodore had left. And finally, Lily got sick with pneumonia, requiring hospitalization. Claire sat in the hospital beside Lily's bed, answering emails on her phone while watching her daughter sleep, and realized she was failing. Failing as a director because she couldn't be everywhere at once. Failing as a mother because she'd been so consumed with the sanctuary that she'd missed the signs of Lily's illness until it became serious. Elena visited her at the hospital with coffee and sympathy. "You look terrible." "Thanks. That's helpful. I'm being honest because I care." "Claire, you're burning out." I've seen it happen to foundation directors before. They take on too much, feel too responsible, and eventually collapse under the weight. I don't have a choice. The sanctuary needs a director who isn't running on empty. It needs a team that can share responsibilities. It needs you to trust other people to carry parts of the burden. I do trust people. Do you? Or do you think that if you're not personally overseeing everything, it'll all fall apart? Claire didn't answer because Elena was right. She'd been holding on too tightly, afraid that delegating meant losing control, that trusting others meant risking Theodore's legacy. Theodore died alone, Elena continued gently, because he didn't trust anyone with what he'd built. He kept the collection secret, kept his dreams private, and died in isolation. You don't have to repeat his mistakes. Those words hit Claire like a physical blow. She'd spent 5 years trying to honor Theodore's legacy, but in doing so, had she also inherited his flaws? His inability to let go? His fear of trusting others? Lily recovered after a week in the hospital. During her convalescence at home, Claire had time to think about Elena's words, about control and trust, about the difference between protecting something and suffocating it. She called an emergency board meeting. "I need to restructure my role," Claire announced to the assembled directors. "I've been trying to do everything myself, and it's not sustainable. I'm proposing we hire an executive director to handle day-to-day operations. I'll remain as board president and collection guardian, but I need to delegate the operational responsibilities." Emma, who'd become one of the board's most valuable members, spoke up immediately. "That makes sense. You've built something incredible, Claire, but running it requires different skills than protecting it. Let people handle operations. You focus on the big picture." The board approved unanimously. Within 2 months, they'd hired Marcus Thompson, a former zoo director with experience managing large public institutions and conservation programs. Marcus was competent, organized, and most importantly, he understood that Claire needed to let go without losing control. "I'm not here to replace you," Marcus told Claire during their first one-on-one meeting. "I'm here to execute your vision. You tell me what the sanctuary should be. I'll make it happen." Slowly, carefully, Claire learned to delegate, learned to trust that Marcus could handle visitor management while she focused on collection stewardship, learned to trust that James could develop educational programs without her oversight, learned to trust that the sanctuary could run without her constant intervention. And with that trust came space. Space to breathe, space to spend time with Lily, space to think about the future rather than constantly managing the present. It was during this breathing space that Claire made an unexpected discovery. She was cataloging Theodore's personal effects, items that hadn't seemed important when she first inherited the sanctuary, but now felt worthy of preservation. Among his books, she found a journal she'd somehow missed before. This journal was different from the others. Personal in a way Theodore's careful documentation of the collection never was. It was dated from 2000 to 2002, his final years. Claire read it over 3 nights, sitting in the special gallery with entropy and emergence, feeling like Theodore was finally speaking to her directly. March 3rd, 2000. Diagnosed today. Pancreatic cancer, stage 3. Doctor gives me 18 months, maybe 2 years. I should be terrified. Instead, I feel relief. Finally, a deadline. Finally, pressure to complete what I've been building. July 12, 2000. Realized today that I'll never see the sanctuary reach its potential. I'm dying, and it's dying with me. No children to inherit. No protege to continue the work. Just this collection and this crumbling dream. But maybe that's appropriate. Maybe everything should die with me. November 8th, 2000. Change my will today. Instead of letting the county auction the property, I'm leaving it to Claire. I've watched her from distance, my sister's granddaughter, a woman I've never met. She works 2 jobs, raises a daughter alone, struggles every day just to survive. People might think I'm cruel giving her a burden like this, but I see something in her circumstances that reminds me of myself 40 years ago. Desperate, fighting, refusing to give up even when logic says you should. She doesn't know it yet, but she has exactly what this sanctuary needs. She knows how to survive, and survival is the first step toward transformation. January 5th, 2001. Commissioned the final piece for Maria today. She thinks I'm being morbid, asking for a dead butterfly, but she doesn't understand. The collection can't end with emergence. Can't end with beautiful butterflies flying. That's a lie. That's pretending transformation is only about becoming better, more beautiful, more perfect. Real transformation includes death, includes decay, includes the ugly, painful process of breaking down so something else can grow. I need Claire to understand this. Need whoever inherits this dream to know that it will die someday. And that's okay. That's natural. That's part of the cycle. December 20th, 2001. Weaker every day. Probably won't live to see Maria finish the final piece. Probably won't live to see Claire discover the collection. Won't be there to explain why I chose her. Why I'm giving her this impossible gift that's also an impossible burden. But maybe explanations aren't necessary. Maybe she'll understand intuitively what took me 60 years to learn. That beauty is temporary, which is exactly what makes it worth protecting. That transformation never stops. That even death is just another form of change. I've spent my life collecting butterflies. Really, I've been collecting hope. Hope that something beautiful can exist, even briefly. Hope that protecting beauty matters, even when you know it can't last. Hope that someone will come after me and continue caring when I'm gone. Claire will understand this. I've never met her, but I know she will. Because she's already been transformed by struggle. Already knows that survival requires constant metamorphosis. She's perfect for this, even if she doesn't know it yet. Especially because she doesn't know it yet. The journal ended there. Theodore died 3 weeks later. Claire closed the journal with shaking hands. All these years, she'd wondered why Theodore chose her. Had assumed it was random or desperate. A dying man leaving everything to the only relative he could find. But it wasn't random. It was intentional. Theodore had watched her life, understood her struggles, and chosen her specifically because she'd already survived the transformation he'd built his life around. She pulled out her phone and called Elena, not caring that it was nearly midnight. "Understand now," Claire said when Elena answered groggily. "Why he chose me. Why the collection mattered so much. Why he needed the final piece to show death and rebirth." "What are you talking about?" Theodore wasn't just collecting butterflies. He was collecting proof that transformation is real. That struggle has purpose. That pain and difficulty and even death are part of something larger. He needed me to inherit this because I'd already lived through metamorphosis. From desperate waitress to foundation director. From someone with nothing to someone protecting $500 million in art. I'm living proof that what the collection represents is true. Elena was quiet for a moment. That's quite an epiphany at midnight. I found his journal. His private journal from the last 2 years of his life. He knew he was dying, and he used that knowledge to complete his work. He wasn't afraid of death. He was afraid of leaving things unfinished. And the collection wasn't finished until it included death as part of the cycle. So what are you going to do with this revelation? Claire looked around the gallery at the dead butterfly sculpture that had caused so much controversy and felt something settle into place. I'm going to make sure people understand what Theodore was trying to say, that this sanctuary isn't about preserving butterflies forever. It's about witnessing transformation in all its forms. including the difficult forms, including the endings. Over the next year, Claire worked with Elena and James to redesign the sanctuary's messaging. Instead of focusing solely on beauty and wonder, they began incorporating education about life cycles, including death and decay. They added a composting area where children could see dead butterflies being returned to the soil. They created exhibits about how butterfly populations fluctuated with climate change, acknowledging that some species were disappearing. It was uncomfortable. Some visitors complained that the sanctuary had become too dark or depressing. But others appreciated the honesty, appreciated that the sanctuary was treating visitors like intelligent people capable of handling complex truths. And the education programs expanded to include end-of-life topics, not just for butterflies, but for humans. In partnership with local hospices and grief counseling centers, the sanctuary began offering special programs for people dealing with loss. They could come to the gallery, sit with entropy and emergence, and process their grief in a space that acknowledged death as part of life cycle. The program became so popular that other institutions reached out wanting to replicate it. Within 3 years, the metamorphosis and mourning model was being used by hospitals, hospices, and counseling centers across the country. Theodore's collection, which he'd built in private and protected in isolation, was now helping thousands of people process the most difficult human experience. His final piece, the one he'd never seen completed, was creating healing he could never have imagined. On the 10th anniversary of Claire's inheritance, the sanctuary held a massive celebration. Tens of thousands of visitors came. Media coverage was international. The collection's value had appreciated to over $700 million. The foundation's endowment topped $850 million. The fellowship program had awarded scholarships to over 400 students. And the sanctuary itself had become one of California's most visited cultural institutions. But the moment that mattered most to Claire came quietly, without cameras or crowds. She was walking through the conservatory with Lily, now 14, and already talking about studying conservation biology in college, when they encountered a young woman sitting on a bench, crying. Claire approached carefully. "Are you okay? Can I help?" The woman looked up, tears streaming down her face, and smiled. "I'm okay. Better than okay. Actually, I just needed a moment." She gestured around at the butterflies. "My mom died 3 months ago. Cancer. And I've been so angry. Angry that she's gone. Angry that life is unfair. Angry that beautiful things end. But I came here today and saw that sculpture. The dead butterfly with the roots growing from it. And I finally understood what my mom was trying to tell me before she died." "What was that?" Claire asked gently. "That her death would feed my life. That everything she taught me, everything she gave me, would become roots for my growth." She said, "I'm not disappearing. I'm transforming into everything you'll become." I didn't understand then, but I do now. The woman stood, wiping her tears. "Thank you for this place. Thank you for being honest about death instead of just showing the pretty parts. Thank you for understanding that real transformation includes the painful parts." As she walked away, Lily squeezed Claire's hand. "That's why Theodore left you everything, isn't it? Because he knew you'd do this. Turn his collection into healing." "I think he hoped I might," Claire said. "But I don't think even he knew exactly what it would become. That's the thing about transformation. You can't control what emerges from the chrysalis. You can only protect the process and trust that something beautiful will come from it." They stood together watching butterflies float through the conservatory, their wings catching light, their brief lives burning bright before fading. And all around them, visitors, children and adults, tourists and locals, people dealing with joy and people dealing with grief, witnessed transformation in its infinite forms. Theodore's legacy was secure, not because Claire had kept everything exactly as he left it, but because she'd allowed it to transform. The sanctuary had grown beyond his original vision. The collection had found purposes he never imagined, and his private dream had become public healing. Some legacies were written in gold and gems, but the best ones were written in courage, transformation, and the willingness to let beautiful things change, even when change meant letting go. Claire had learned this lesson, had lived it, had emerged from struggle into something that could fly. And, standing in the conservatory Theodore built, protecting the collection he assembled, continuing the work he started, Claire finally understood the complete cycle. Not just egg to caterpillar to chrysalis to butterfly, but also death to decay to rebirth to beauty to death again. Cycling endlessly, each transformation feeding the next. Theodore had given her more than wealth. He'd given her a philosophy, a way of understanding that struggle had purpose, that pain fed growth, that even endings were beginnings in disguise. And Claire had taken that gift and multiplied it beyond measure, had turned one man's isolated dream into thousands of people's healing, had transformed Theodore's lonely collection into a living sanctuary where beauty and death and transformation were witnessed daily by those who needed to see them most. The chrysalis had opened. The butterfly had emerged. It had flown, and eventually it would fall. Its body would feed the earth, and from that earth, new butterflies would emerge. And the cycle would continue, as it always had, as it always would, beautiful and terrible and absolutely necessary. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you love this story about transformation, legacy, and discovering hidden treasures, check out the other incredible stories on your screen now. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. We have so many more amazing inheritance stories to share with you. See you in the next story.